It is so counterintuitive. Eat meat, eggs, cheese, lose weight. NBC Chief Science Correspondent Robert Bazell tonight with a new study.
Here's the most important thing to remember. The studies on these
so
foods
takes on one of the biggest diet debates. Is it more important to cut carbs or fat if you want to lose weight and stay healthy? Here with what the researchers found.
Is one healthier than the other? Is one healthier than the other?
I think low carb metabolically and nutritionally is healthy.
Good News America. Beef, eggs, butter, and tropical oils all back on the menu with a thumbs up from many experts.
The government altering guidelines for cholesterol consumption. More and more health experts are taking a fresh look at saturated fat foods that have been on the don't eat list for decades.
There's really no evidence to show that the low-fat diet has any advantage, and now there's really compelling evidence to the contrary.
This latest study was run by the Harvard School of Public Health. The study compared 3 diets: a low-fat diet, a Mediterranean diet, an Atkins-type diet, where people did not worry about calories but replaced carbohydrates, mostly with protein and fat from fish, chicken, and vegetable sources. Some experts worried about their health risks, especially cholesterol and other risk factors for heart disease. The Atkins-type diet was the winner, with people losing an average of just over 12 pounds.
These findings, though, are still going to be considered, I would guess, controversial because this was funded in part by the Atkins Foundation.
Packaging was always very seductive.
All in the media,
the whole
and magazines.
Media is about being thinner, being skinny, looking this way, and if you eat this way, you will have the body you want, you will have all the energy you want.
Start losing weight today.
I have tried probably every diet that exists. I've tried them all.
Tried many different diets.
Going back to college days, I tried Atkins.
You name it. I was the Atkins diet.
A million-year-old diet. Modern age.
The most recent diet that I tried was
So I've seen a handful of patients that have taken on the keto diet craze, and in those patients I have noticed some emerging patterns. For those of them that can actually get through the initial symptoms of lethargy and tiredness and nausea and bad breath and constipation and low libido, the so-called keto flu, for those that actually manage to get it through that stage, they do see some short-term benefits. So they'll get some weight loss, they might get better control of their blood glucose, and they may even have a reduced lipid profile. And that can sometimes reinforce the diet changes for them until they start to run into problems. I have one patient in particular who had a rise in his cholesterol levels and his LDL cholesterol, his lipid profiles, even as he was losing weight. And I know that's a really well documented problem with a lot of low carb diets. And he unfortunately had that side effect. I also had another patient who just got really fed up with eating so much meat. He actually felt quite lacking in energy. And he just, it is a very restrictive diet. I think he just felt he wanted to try and bring in some more vegetables into his life. So overall, I'd say people have had some short-term results with it, but at the cost of long-term health. And I've seen that time and again. I've looked into studies myself, and I haven't managed to find any long-term benefit from keto in terms of studies. But what I have found is case reports of people with kidney stones and dehydration and cardiac arrhythmias. And I even found 5 studies that linked true ketogenic diet with death in children who are having to follow it for medical reasons. So it's definitely not something to take lightly. And as I said to my patients, why would you do this? Why would you carb count and have to do a urine test for ketones every day when you can just eat vibrant plant foods and stay well and lose weight and have an increased lifespan? It's a win-win.
The place to start talking about ketogenic diets is to acknowledge that there are a couple of circumstances in which they can actually be helpful. One is childhood epilepsy. Very little children often recover from epilepsy using a ketogenic diet. And the other is cancer patients. Advanced cancer patients sometimes benefit. But the reason why it's so important to stay away from this unless you fit those particular criteria is that there are dangerous and sometimes life-threatening side effects that result from a ketogenic diet. So if you have terminal cancer, you may not mind the side effects too much, but if you are not a cancer patient, if you don't have seizures all day long, you really don't qualify for a ketogenic diet, and the side effects might bother you a lot. And just a few of them that I'll mention. One is dehydration, which is persistent, constant, never goes away. Gastrointestinal complications are really common. Infectious diseases, pneumonia, hypoglycemia, electrolyte, and sometimes life-threatening electrolyte imbalances, hepatitis, acute pancreatitis, osteopenia, kidney stones, iron deficiency anemia, cardiomyopathy develops after 1 month in some ketogenic diet patients. And so these are risks that might be worth taking if you really stood to benefit from the diet, but if you do not meet those categories, it is a terrible idea because it's all risk and no benefit whatsoever. Lots of side effects, no benefit. On the other hand, when people eat a diet based on whole foods, a plant-based, low-fat, high-fiber diet, the only side effect is you're inclined to lose weight, your skin clears up, your hair looks better, your diabetes goes away, your cardiovascular disease begins to regress, your cholesterol drops, your blood pressure becomes better. Those are some side effects I think most people are pretty interested in. You sleep better, your energy improves, your athleticism improves. So you compare the side effects of the whole foods plant-based diet with the side effects of the ketogenic diet, and I think every time the whole foods plant-based diet wins out. Let's face it, which would you rather have? Gastrointestinal complications and kidney stones, or better energy, clear skin, beautiful hair, and weight loss and reverse some of your diseases? I don't think that many people would have to debate very long about that.
Yeah, so the keto diet, correctly done, is not a high-protein diet. That's where keto people mess up big time. So the people that are doing the research on keto diets mainly want their patients eating a very high-fat diet. Still higher protein than I would want, but nowadays, I just got back from a conference looking at the latest literature, and they're really trying to steer clear of steak, red meat, processed meat, and they're really trying to get at lots of fats.
So right now, ketogenic diets are very, very popular, right? As you know, in lots of magazines and dietitians and nutritionists are suggesting the ketogenic diet, but I have lots of patients who want to try it and are on it, and they come to me and they are asking questions about it, right? So this is a very important topic. So what a ketogenic diet, so maybe I'll explain a little bit, is a high-fat, moderate protein, low-carb diet. It's sort of like a little spin-off from the paleo, except it's very high fat. So majority of the calories should come from fat. And the whole idea is to force the body into ketosis, which is a fat burning stage. And I mean, the concept may make sense in some ways, but it's problematic when someone starts doing it for a very long time, which is what I start seeing in people. I mean, sometimes people will try it for 2-3 weeks just to kind of get things under control, but we're talking about patients who are on it for months and months. And as we know, a high-fat diet is not a good idea. I mean, every study shows that a low-fat diet is the best diet for treating chronic disease. So you can potentially put your body into a very inflammatory state, right? And often people are not choosing the right fats. So when they're on a ketogenic diet, I've seen people use butter, which is all saturated fats, right? And they think they can eat as much meat with the fat as possible because they think, oh, the fat is good. So they're not trimming the fats off their meats now, right? Which is not a good idea. Now, if you flip it around and you use a plant-based ketogenic diet, it can actually be potentially quite healthy because we are increasing things like nuts and seeds, coconut oil, olive oil, avocados, which generally are very low in a lot of people's diets. So if you ask a general person, what do they eat? They never eat seeds, they never eat nuts, they don't eat avocados, right? So we were actually incorporating healthy fats into their diet. And so there's different ways of doing the ketogenic diet, but the one where they're doing high fat, high meat diets is definitely not a healthy way.
So I have seen patients that have used the ketogenic diet, and it's very interesting because I think prior to becoming a physician, I didn't know much about the ketogenic diet. And then one of the most notable cases that I remember was a patient that was in his early 40s, and he was quite healthy on the outside, and he was rushed into the hospital with an emergency heart attack. He had a STEMI, which is the bad kind of heart attack. And I remember seeing him in the cardiac ICU the next day after they'd found and fixed a blockage in one of his coronary arteries. And on the outside, he was the picture of health. And once discussing with him, I found out that he had been on the ketogenic diet for over 10 years.
The keto diet by itself is represented, as I said, by a high protein, a high fat, and a low carbohydrate context. Now, this is a context that's been around since the 60s. Atkins came out with it. South Beach, the Florida diet. Any new kid on the block that proves to be the new diet is somewhere revolving around the constellation of a keto diet. So the keto diet science is represented generally by the fact that it's a starvation program. It's a non-sustainable program. The patients that I've seen who have come to me on the keto diet have come to me with claims of losing weight, which is correct, but we know why they lose weight. We know they lose weight because of starvation, but they start to feel fatigued, they start to feel run down, they start to have issues with absorption of some of the micronutrients that they necessarily would have no issue with. It's not a sustainable diet. And I've seen some people who have gone on a say, high bacon and a low carbohydrate diet do really, really poorly. Their liver enzymes start to strain, their body starts to fatigue, and it's simply a matter of diverting them back to that wonderful whole foods plant-based diet, the diet that revolves around fresh fruit, vegetables, the corn, potatoes, the starchy foods, the lentils and beans, which are high in protein, but they're derived from the ground, and so naturally they're going to be high in those micronutrients, those metals like calcium and zinc and phosphorus and magnesium. These are these little micronutrients constitute building blocks of the cell and building blocks of proteins and building blocks of some of the larger parts of our body. They're so essential, and it all comes from the ground. So the whole foods diet itself is a very fresh way of looking at how we revitalize our health.
So I usually see patients after a keto diet has failed them, so they've lost a little bit of weight and maybe their blood sugar has improved a little bit, but then they either gain all the weight back, or worse, I've actually recently seen someone who gained it back plus. So I'm usually there for them to sort of help them get their health back together versus just getting some little short-term outcomes. So in terms of ketogenic diets versus whole food plant-based diets, ketogenic diets have a lot of serious risks associated with them. So the biggest one being that we know for a fact that low-carb diets are linked to a higher risk of all-cause mortality, which is basically dying from any cause. And the most extreme form of a low-carb diet is a ketogenic diet. So there's that. We know that when most people eat a keto diet, they actually are increasing their intake of things like red meat and processed meat, which we know is linked to colon cancer risk. And then this is really scary. So for women of reproductive age, the risk of having a baby with a severe birth defect, these are neural tube defects, and the two that they were looking at specifically were spina bifida and anencephaly, which is being born basically with very little brain tissue and very little skull. So it's not a survivable birth defect. Is that the risk of having one of those birth defects is 30% higher if the mom is on a low carb style diet when she is pregnant. And the scary thing is those defects happen early in pregnancy before a lot of women even know they're pregnant. So it's a concern because women who might be following these diets and get pregnant really could put the fetus at risk.
There's no question there remains a lot of controversy about a lot of the diets that are out there. So we hear a lot about the paleo diet, about the ketogenic diets, where people are really consuming very high amounts of animal protein. But there really are data that are lacking to suggest that that can have any kind of positive impact on your lipid profile or your risk of developing heart disease. In fact, I mean, it's anecdotal, but I've had several patients that have actually been hospitalized recently with heart attacks who have adopted those types of changes and now have come to regret it. Of course, those are just small numbers, but even the larger scale studies at this point don't really support the concept that by taking in more animal protein that you can reduce your risk of developing a cardiovascular event. If anything, it's the reverse.
Now, what this does is that the body will then break down all the excess fat that we have, as well as utilize the fat and the protein that is consumed in the diet. It does this to survive. Now, the body principally will fuel itself from sugar. It takes that sugar, it breaks up all the bonds between the sugar molecules and within the sugar molecule, and that energy that gets released when those bonds are broken is converted to chemical energy within the cell. That's principally how cellular metabolism and respiration works. And the byproduct of that is water and carbon dioxide, which we excrete. So when the body doesn't have free sugar, It uses fat and protein, and it breaks them all up, particularly the fat, and uses the energy in the fat molecule. And we get a byproduct called ketones, and the body goes into ketosis. And this is the circumstances by which keto diets principally work, that they burn all the excess fat. Now, yes, you get incredible weight loss and you get it fairly quickly. And we know the science behind why that happens. And there is some argument that the pro-keto people will use, that you see people do better when they're on keto diets, and here's the proof. The reality is they probably do better because their weight loss comes down, their weight comes down. So when people lose weight, of course, they're going to have more mobility, their sugars are going to be better, their diabetic profile will look better, and to some extent their energy levels may be slightly elevated because of the excess ketones in the body. But this only lasts for a very short period of time. We know that from long-term studies, when patients follow the keto diet, they irrespectively, without realizing it, will push themselves into states of disease, and cardiovascular disease being the number one thing that we worry about. This is because the animal proteins themselves contain a very high concentration of choline, and choline gets metabolized in the stomach and then gets fixed in the liver to a product called trimethylamine oxide. And trimethylamine oxide goes around the body and induces inflammation. It drives the pathways of stroke, of hypertension, of vascular disease. So the keto diet itself has the science behind it to lose weight quickly. It's unsustainable, but we do see people do well on it because of the weight loss. But of course, the long-term outcomes are very, very, very poor.
The thing about the keto diet is we don't really know. We don't have long-term data.
We all see, all of us doctors, will see patients trying a ketogenic diet. And it's basically the low carbohydrate diet that has gone through the Atkins phase, the South Beach phase, now it's the keto phase. It's the same thing. And what always happens is that people are very optimistic when they start it. They're hoping to lose a lot of weight because that's what's been promised. And some of them will lose weight. The ones who lose weight are the ones who kick out all the carbohydrates, and since that's about 50 or 60% of their diet, they're kind of starving their way thin. And then after about 2 months or so, they get really tired of it, or their friends comment on their ketogenic breath, which is another part, or sometimes they get really, I mean, heroically constipated. These are common problems. And in about 1 in 3, their cholesterols go through the roof because they're eating, in some cases, more meat than they were before. But there are a lot of patients who try it and nothing happens. They don't lose weight at all. And they wonder, why are they doing this? And that's because they're avoiding all the healthy starchy foods. But they're making up for it with cheese and meat. Their calorie content doesn't drop at all. They don't lose an ounce. So no matter who they are, within a year, virtually all of them have given up on it. They're almost always heavier than they were before, and they're discouraged. And I have to tell you, if you follow these people over the longer term, their mortality is higher. A low-carb diet is an invitation to dying younger because you're not giving your body the nutrition it needs. So I encourage people, don't jump onto that fad.
For plant-based diets, there's a growing amount of literature, and really literature actually that goes back a couple of decades, showing that by adopting a predominantly plant-based diet, that you can have a dramatic improvement on your lipids, you can have a dramatic improvement on measures of inflammation, and also that you can really reduce your risk of having a cardiovascular event. So there's a role both for primary prevention as well as secondary prevention. People who have the disease, there might be opportunities to actually reverse the course, not just stabilize it. And when you take a step back, when you think about the medications that we have available to treat heart disease, most of them really just are able to keep things, best case scenario, stable. They're not able to actually reverse where you are at that point in time. So it's really exciting to think about the possibilities that the diet alone can achieve.
We have many clients that come to the Mastering Diabetes program who have adopted a ketogenic diet for sometimes months up to years. So they're eating a low carbohydrate diet because they've been told that carbohydrates are their enemy, and the more carbohydrate they're going to eat, the more insulin they're going to need. So as a result of that, they're eating lots of meats, cheeses, fish, some dairy products, and they're using oils. And what they're able to do is actually maintain their blood glucose very flatline. So from a blood glucose perspective, it gives them excellent control. The problem, though, is that over the course of time, they end up developing a whole host of side effects. And these side effects include high cholesterol, hypertension. They increase their base level of insulin resistance, which is the underlying condition in diabetes. So they actually end up depositing more lipid or more fat inside of their muscle tissue and inside of their liver tissue. A lot of these people have a difficult time thinking. They get sort of foggy brain, they get digestive problems, and they lose a ton of energy. So then we transition them to a plant-based diet that's especially low in fat. So it's a low-fat, plant-based whole food diet, and they see tremendous results. The problem, or the thing that they go into this diet thinking is that, oh, if I eat a plant-based diet, especially if I'm eating carbohydrate-rich food, my blood glucose is going to skyrocket. It's going to go through the roof. But that doesn't actually happen. And the reason it doesn't happen is because as they're eating more carbohydrate energy, they're eating less fatty acid energy or less lipids. And as a result of that, their blood glucose stays nice and flat, and they still get all of these positive benefits, including improved digestion, reduced insulin resistance, reduced risk for cancer, heart disease, and they feel a ton better.
It's not an optimal diet for human health. We have not been used to eating a high-fat diet for decades or centuries, whereas a plant-based diet has been eaten by the longest lived populations and the healthiest populations in the world, and we know are associated with lower risks of chronic diseases, which are now so prevalent in our society. So plant-based diet essentially reduces the risk of heart disease, cancer, hypertension, diabetes, the top killers in our current society, whereas you really cannot say that about the ketogenic diet. We know that the ketogenic diet is meant to be one where you're eating predominantly fat, and so the body utilizes fat as their main source of energy. This would be having a diet that's 70 to 80% rich in fat, mainly from animal sources, so saturated fat. And the saturated fat we know is associated with increased risks of heart disease, diabetes, cancer, and really the only reason someone should be on a ketogenic diet is if they have intractable epilepsy, in which most of the long-term studies have been conducted. So children with epilepsy do show some benefit from a ketogenic diet, but the side effects are vast. They include upset of the stomach, so diarrhea or diabetes, fatigue, problems with energy, pancreatitis, which is inflammation of the pancreas, kidney stones, which are highly prevalent in the children that are taking a ketogenic diet. And in the long term, ketogenic diets or high-fat diets have been associated with increased risk of dying, in addition to increased risk of heart disease as well.
When anyone asks me about low-carb eating, I am inclined to point out the obvious, which is fiber. That's a carbohydrate. You want to eat lots of fiber, so a low-carb diet is not going to be the most helpful choice. And in fact, there was a study that came out recently, very recently, that showed low-carb dieting is actually unhealthy. It's unhealthy in terms of life expectancy, and it's also unhealthy in terms of the diseases you might get, like heart disease and diabetes. So we definitely don't want to talk about low carb eating. We want to eat lots of carbs. We want to eat good carbs. We want to eat fruits, vegetables, beans, and grains. That is the healthiest diet. And we reaffirm that with studies over and over again, and emphasis on reaffirming, but affirming what we already know. Eating carbs, good carbs, is a great idea.
So a plant-based diet is better than a keto diet because it gives people all those outcomes that they really wanted from a keto diet, which is usually things like weight loss and lower blood sugar, but it also promotes long-term health. So it includes foods that will reduce the risk of things like breast cancer and colon cancer and heart disease and stroke. I mean, if you lose weight but you have a heart attack, you haven't gained anything. So a plant-based diet gives people all those short-term outcomes that they want and also gives them immense long-term benefits.
The reality is that we've been on this high-protein, low-carbohydrate craze for years now, yet no one has stopped to analyze how these diets differ from what we've been offered before. It's like we're getting sold the same thing over and over again, and someone's just putting a sticker over it with another name, a new fad, a new trend. It's all the same thing. High animal protein, low carbohydrates. People say low carbohydrates like it's a good thing. Essentially, what we should be eating is more carbohydrates and less protein, but that flips this entire fad on its head. But the reality is that the proof lies in the clinical trials. The proof lies in the data. The numbers don't lie, right? We know that heart disease is still killing us. It's still the #1 killer, and we know that we have the cure to heart disease. We have the ability to eradicate heart disease with a plant-based diet. It is the only diet in the world that has been proven to prevent, arrest, and reverse heart disease.
Hi, this is Klaus, and I want to say a big thank you for watching Plant-Based News. It's people like you who mean we can continue to create films, campaigns, and up-to-the-minute plant-based news. I wanted to let you know about PBN Insiders, a subscription-based platform where you can receive exclusive perks and content not available to the general public. If you become a PBN Insider, you'll automatically be entered into a drawing for the chance to win a nutrition course worth over $1,200. This is the eCornell plant-based nutrition course headed up by pioneer Dr. T. Colin Campbell, and you can do it from anywhere in the world because it's over the internet. In addition, PBN Insiders get access to a whole array of unique content, including bonus interview segments, behind-the-scenes PBN footage, cooking videos, vegan diet guides, and much, much more. I'll put the link down below, but some of my favorite segments include a video featuring 15 of the leading plant-based doctors where they go over their favorite recipes, an exclusive interview of Ed Winters, otherwise known as Earthling Ed, about his journey to becoming the activist that he is today. Some behind-the-scenes full-length interviews from our end-of-year documentary Vegan 2018. And there's tons of other interviews, including exclusive segments from, for example, Beyonce's nutritionist Marco Borges, as well as others including Dr. Milton Mills, Dr. Laurie Menino, Dr. Salish Rao, Just and former Hampton Creek CEO Josh Tetrick, Dr. Joel Furman, UK grime artist JME, and Dr. Will Tuttle. A lot of people have also enjoyed the What I Eat in a Day video from Prince Khaled and the Meal Inspiration video guide and the supporting PDF guide from leading fitness models, as well as the cooking segments from world-leading plant-based chefs. You also get to access the library of conference presentations, including Dr. Anthony Hadge's 40-minute talk about the power of plant-based nutrition, a private plant-based news event, and much, much more. Becoming a PBN Insider directly supports our mission to create more films, campaigns, and of course, up-to-the-minute plant-based news across all of our social media platforms. If you've got any questions about PBN Insiders or anything related to the platform, please feel free to email me at klaus@plantbasednews.org, and hopefully see you on the inside.